Welcome to your EV listening podcast, Take It EV. I'm your host, Phil Nash.
And I'm the other host, Gregg.
Well, EV is in the name, so this is the show where we'll talk about electric vehicles. But we'll also get into self-driving cars and other forms of futuristic, sustainable transport.
But we will be mostly talking about EVs.
That's in the name. A few weeks have passed since our last episode. Got a lot of things to talk about, although nothing to announce, sadly. But I just want to say that most of the reason for the delay was my fault, so I apologise for that. And I'm apologising explicitly, even though that's what you're not supposed to do when doing a podcast, because I think there's a couple of good stories in the reasons why. Mostly because I moved house, and the house I'm in now no longer has a charging point. So that's brought some challenges with it. So we might talk about that a bit later.
Interesting.
And I've also done quite a bit of travelling as well, and got some stories there. So talking of stories, I think you've got a couple of trip reports to do as well, haven't you, Greg?
Yeah, quite a few. Maybe start with your story or two.
Okay, well, the house move. So I used to have a pod point charging point in the old house, so that was very convenient. The house I'm in now, well, it's a rented house, first of all, so it's quite difficult to get a pod point put in. I managed to convince the landlord that we could put one in, and then discovered that the time period for being able to get the grant for the charging point, so cut off, I think it was April 2017 or something. So we can no longer get that. It's going to be £600-700 to have one put in. We can't quite afford that, just for the sake of a rented place. So what we've been doing so far is just trailing a cable out the front window, which not particularly convenient in the winter is what we found. So working on what we're going to do there. In the meantime, I think it was you actually pointed out a while back that there's a place just around the corner from where we live that now does a fast charging point, and you need to sign up for, is it the Polar Network?
It is, yeah.
And although you have to pay a monthly fee, if you use it regularly enough, what you save on the cost should offset the monthly fee. So I'm considering doing that, but it's still not quite as convenient. So I'm starting to feel what it's like for some other people that don't have easy access to a charging point.
Did you listen to the second episode of Take It EV where I waffled about this?
I did, yes. And I agree it can definitely be done. I'm doing it, in fact. It's your story, I think, was even harder. It could definitely be done with a bit of dedication. Obviously, if we're going to move to the next stage of adoption, more and more people driving electric vehicles, and there's this sort of extra degree of inconvenience that's going to put a lot of people off. So it's interesting to just sort of feel out what the problems are and experience them firsthand, and also try to come up with some solutions.
I do agree that the making things easier for people is a good thing, and sometimes just you have to lead people to the water, otherwise they're not going to go there themselves. It's a story for another podcast, but I had quite a few encounters with people who are not very convinced that EVs are taking on, which obviously since we're in that bubble we disagree with that. But
yeah, there's definitely a bubble involved, and obviously we're sort of fairly committed to the idea and to the cause, and so we can push for a bit of pain. But I definitely think that with the coming sort of new generation with bigger ranges, that's going to make a lot of these problems a lot easier. So I've got the I think it's the 24 kilowatt Leaf. So the range is not that great. We have to top that up quite frequently. Now, if we only had to do it, say, once a week, then trailing that cable out or making the visit around the corner to the fast charger would be a lot more tolerable. So I think that's going to make a big difference, even apart from all the other obvious advantages to having a greater range. So looking forward to that. And in fact, we are in the market at the moment for a new car. So we're wondering whether to hold off for the potential 60 kilowatt hour Leaf that may be coming later this year. I've heard rumours about it, or even just going for the current 40 kilowatt hour would definitely be a big step up from where we are now. May actually be the difference that we need.
Yeah, you can also put in more things into it, because I've heard the boot is much larger than the Leafs we have.
It is definitely a bit larger. Tried to compare it side by side, but our boot at the moment is so full up with junk, it's difficult to really compare. And that's part of the problem as well. But yeah, it's still not a big car, but it's big enough for most local journeys and running about. It's what we use it for most of the time. So every little helps. I agree. We did take that for a test drive a couple of weeks ago, and was very nice to drive. Obviously, the main difference between an electric car and a petrol or diesel car is that initial torque, particularly in the Leaf. That's the same as it's always been. But the Pro Pilot for keeping you in lane, even going around slight bends, slowing down when the car in front slows down, was all very interesting. Seemed to work fine. And I will definitely feel more comfortable doing a longer journey in that car, knowing that if I lost attention for a moment, it would have my back. Still a long way from being able to rely on that for what you might think of as autonomous driving. So we're not talking about that yet, not in the Leafs at least. But it's nice to have those features in there as well. Although for me, one of the biggest benefits of the new Leaf is the introduction of CarPlay, which I have to say, having used that a few times now, very difficult to go back to a car without it. It makes such a difference. So yeah. Not really an EV thing, but definitely a modern car thing.
Yeah, I since we jumping onto that subject, I test drove it as well. We just came up to the end of our lease on our 30 kilowatt hour Leaf, and it was a bit of a choice between moving on to the newer car or keeping the Leaf, the 30 kilowatt hour Leaf. And spoiler alert, we are keeping the 30 kilowatt hour Leaf. And the reason being, there's quite a few reasons, but it mostly comes down to the price. The quote we were given. I made a mistake, and I bought the when I was buying the 30 kilowatt hour Leaf, I didn't ask for any discounts. I basically paid the full sticker price, as I used to do on my other cars in the past. And I couldn't haggle with people at Vauxhall or any other garages where I would. And I used to buy just second-hand cars anyway, so that's a different story. So I have assumed it's the same sort of scenario in case of the Nissan, and turns out that the on the 40 kilowatt hour Nissan you no longer can get any major discounts through Nissan. So we would end up paying essentially £100 more to lease the new one compared to the old one, which just doesn't make much sense. And also, I felt like the jump from 30 kilowatt hour to 40 kilowatt hour isn't that much of a step up to explain the £100 price difference to my wife, basically, and get any sort of agreement on it. So I don't know. There is a I did try rapid charging it a few times, and just like the stories say, it doesn't take the second rapid charge very well. So that's another worry, because I do quite a few long trips where I do usually quick charge a few times. would be lovely to be able to do that. So those two things basically my worry that I wouldn't be able to do a trip to, say, Aberystwyth.
Good. That's interesting. I hadn't heard about that. You're saying if you're doing 2 rapid charges in succession, presumably with a drive in between, that the second one is not as effective or takes longer, or what's the problem there?
Well, that's the whole rapid gate issue that was discovered as soon as people took deliveries of their 40 kilowatt Nissan Leafs. As soon as they were able to rapid charge once, no problems, but the second rapid charge would be limit. The charging rate would be limited. So in order to get the 80% charging, you would have to wait over an hour.
Right.
And then it keeps on slowing down every charge after that. Sadly, I only had the car for 2 days, so I couldn't properly test that. I couldn't do the trip to Wales and back to actually, I could do that trip, but I don't want to get stuck.
Yeah.
So I didn't have the sort of enough envelope to try things like that. So I just took my 30 kilowatt hour Leaf, which I know what it can do. If I do 55 miles an hour on the motorway, I can do in a good weather. I can do over 100 miles in my Leaf, so I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, you have slightly more range than me already, and I think you're slightly more prepared to do those longer journeys already. You've done a couple of trips to Aberystwyth and some other places that you'll probably tell us about in a moment. Whereas apart from my initial journey, where I think I've mentioned before, I drove down from Gateshead down to Tunbridge, so that's 350 miles. Stopped about 8 times along the way. Generally, we tend to avoid the longer journeys. It's mostly for our local journeys around town. So that difference between our 24 kilowatt hour and the 40 would be quite big, because it would make quite a lot of relevant journeys doable now.
I agree. That's a huge difference. I have some other thoughts on the new Leaf, such as I don't know what it is about. I don't know if it's generally Nissan or Japanese car makers, but you can't adjust the steering wheel properly, so you can't move it up or down.
Right.
My wife is shorter than me, so she has to move the seat very close to the pedals, which means your steering wheel is just literally right up your face. Sometimes it's just uncomfortable that way. And I don't know, the seating position in the new Leaf feels a bit more cramped. I don't know what the technical names for these things are, but the top of the dashboard, I felt like it was higher up, and also the rear view mirror was obstructing a bit more front view than the old Leaf. Like there were slight differences like that. On the plus side, I did like the sort of the semi-automated steering features, like you said, the lane keeping ProPilot features. But the thing is, these days, pretty much if you buy a new car, pretty much every new car will have a similar feature to that. So they're just keeping up with the. I feel like they're just keeping up with the current trends. They're not really leading, or they're not leaping forwards.
Well, a lot of them do. I wouldn't say the whole of them. And many of them, they will have the sensors, and they will give you warnings, but not actually do the taking control of the steering wheel part.
True, but any car that we drove that was built in the last year, like either we rented or we seen, would have that feature, at least as an option, because on the Leaf, you have to pay extra for it. It doesn't come as standard.
That's true.
And which is also disappointing, to be honest. The things that I liked is it does feel much nippier than and I think it is on paper. It's got a few more horses under the bonnet than the old Leaf.
Electric horses.
Electric horses, yeah. They retained the boost button at the end of the accelerator pedal, so when you push it all the way, it still has that the leap effect.
Yeah.
which I do like on the Leaf, and I have to say that every other EV that I've test drove actually is lacking that, and I'm missing it. The new sort of interface, I don't know. I was a bit hesitant initially about the old school steam gauges, as they call them, as opposed to the electronic display. But I have to say I did like it. It didn't take me too long to get used to it. I did like the seats. Seats are so much better than the our Leafs, I feel. I especially like the hand rest or elbow rest or whatever you call it. It's, I don't know, it just felt a bit more modern and comfy. I test drove so the Leaf that I test drove was the N connector model, and it was loaded with all the like things like ProPilot. So obviously I had to test the self parking option, and I don't know. I will usually when you get a car for test drive, the dealer or the salesperson will give you a bit of walk around. But I always say I'm a technical person; I can figure these things out. And it was a bit of a mistake to do that in this case, because I'm sure he could have showed me things that I wouldn't think about. But one of the things that I found afterwards that could have nearly cost me insurance cost of fixing their car is the auto parking. Basically, I decided to test it on our local roads here in Tunbridge, and then on my way back, and it was fine. It was I felt like it was too quick to park. So basically, what the way you self park the Leaf is you tell it that you want to park. You press the little button on the screen where you want it to park, and then it asks you to press the self parking button, and you have to keep it depressed. If you let go, it will stop. It's just a safety feature, right?
Makes sense.
And obviously, you have to pay attention to it when you're doing it. So we did it a few times, and it just felt like finding a space takes so long. I could park the car myself in the meantime, which is the basically the procedure to go through to actually for the car to do it is so complicated. By the time you do all these things, and if you're technically savvy like I am, it's fine. But if you give it to somebody who isn't and who doesn't have the patience for technology, they'll just give up. So I feel like that's a wasted opportunity on Nissan side, and also the fact that it does it so quickly, it doesn't give you much time to react in case you're about to bump into something. And so on that subject, as I was driving it back to the Nissan, I thought, well, I haven't actually tried it to reverse into space, to do the parallel parking next to the curb on the road. So I thought I'll just give it a go, 2 streets away from the garage, and it just did it so quick. It just ended up mounting the curb, and I was shocked. Basically, I was like, "Whoa, what just happened?" And a few times when we were parking it around Tunbridge, how you have lampposts and things, and just posts basically behind your behind the car park. It just felt like it got very close to them as I was parking it, and so I spoke to the person at the garage, the salesperson at the garage, and he said to me, "Oh, by the way, that as soon as you pick the position where you want to, because basically it gives you on the screen 360 view of where you want to park.
Yeah.
As soon as you confirm that, the car assumes that you've looked at all the obstacles, such as posts, poles, anything that is in the way. So it will stop if there's a person passing by. But if there's a fixture that's been there before the car decided to park, it will just drive through it. So it's good to know that, right?
Yes.
It seems like a bit of a safety concern. Anyway, I just felt like that self-parking feature is a bit useless, to be honest.
So your summary of self-parking is that it's too slow and it's too fast.
It's too slow, right? It's too fast, and then it's dangerous. And I might put that picture in the show notes. But the car basically just, it didn't go up the curb, a lot, but it mounted the curb. And I don't know, you just if you have the new car with nice alloys, you don't want the car itself to scratch the alloys.
No, ideally not.
It's better obviously that it mounts the curb than it scratches the alloys, but I don't know. It just felt a bit clumsy. I was expecting something better out of it. Maybe I had too much of an expectation. I don't know. Overall, I'd like to say the audio interface has all the latest gimmicks, so you can plug in your phone and it will show you the interface. On iOS or on Android, you have to download an app for that, but but it still does that. So that's very, very nice. The map interface still looks the same as the old Leaf, but I presume that the whole computer behind it is newer and better and all that.
Yeah, I would expect so.
I think that's about it. The boot space is much larger because they've removed the pillars on the side from the old Leaf, so you can actually fit in a suitcase or I don't play the guitar as much as I used to, but I could fit in the guitar because in the current Leaf I have to kind of put the guitar case sideways, but in the new Leaf you can just slide it in. And it just all goes in and stays at the bottom.
And that's an electric guitar, I hope.
Yes, it's an electric guitar, of course.
As opposed to a petrol or diesel guitar.
I'm sure someone's made one. I don't want to Google it now. But so, do you have any other thoughts on the new Leaf?
Yeah, so the one that I had didn't have the parking ability, just had the lane guidance and slowing down for the car in front. So those things worked fine as long as you realise their limitations as well. That they're not actually full on driving the car; they're just helping with the steering a bit. And it's only really for use on motorways and other major roads. Ideally dual carriageway. Doesn't work on the little local roads. Certainly not the ones around here in Tunbridge.
No, too many bends.
Yeah. I did take my hands off for a few seconds just to see what would happen, and it did give me a few seconds before it started to complain. I didn't leave it long enough for it to slow down, but it's good to know that it's not so strict that it complains as soon as you take your hands off, but also doesn't let you leave them off for too long, which I think at this stage of the game is definitely what you want, really, because it's not something you want to take your mind off for too long.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
I didn't pay too much attention to the seats themselves. They seem comfortable enough for me. But it's a good point that you mentioned about not being adjustable so much. So if we do look into it again, I'll need to get my wife to sit in the driver's seat as well. Make sure it's going to be okay for her. The mapping system wouldn't be an issue for me because I'll be using CarPlay all the time. And I'd recommend anyone that has certainly an iPhone, but presumably an Android phone as well, to do that if you can, because it's such a nicer experience. And yeah, we're still not quite sure if we're going to go for it or not because we're not desperate at the moment. Right now, we do have a diesel car as well for the longer journeys or for when we need a bigger car, and we're going to continue to need that for the foreseeable future. So, if we got the new Leaf, there'll be more journeys that we could do in it that we can't now, but not so many that it's going to be life-changing. So, we're thinking about holding out for the 60 kilowatt-hour model. I think that's going to be the same basic design, just the bigger battery is my understanding, but I'm not sure we know enough about it yet. But that in itself would still be worth waiting for. If it is going to come in the next year, then I think we can afford to wait for that.
Yeah, I'm very curious about the 60 kilowatt-hour Leaf. I think it's going to be. Well, it's supposed to be announced pretty soon. It was supposed to be announced September last year, but because of all the internal financial scandals inside Nissan, I think they have postponed some of the launches. At least that's the rumors. I don't know. I don't know. I don't have any secret squirrels telling me things from Nissan, because it will be in Japanese and I don't speak any Japanese. But it will be interesting to find out, because certainly the new Leaf is supposed to be much more efficient. Because the problem that I'm having with the 30 kilowatt hour Leaf is that if I push it, this might get a bit technical, but there's a lot of there's a lot of there's loads of losses in the batteries. So if you push the Leaf too hard, if you basically discharge the battery too quick, a lot of energy is lost in the heat. It just basically heats up, and it's certainly true for the 30 kilowatt hour Leaf. And basically, the higher the pack density, the higher the resistance of the pack, and obviously the higher is I don't know the technical term for this, but basically it keeps the heat on for much longer, because obviously it's a denser material, so it's harder for the heat to dissipate. And obviously 30 kilowatt hour pack is much denser than the 24 kilowatt hour pack, and the 40 kilowatt hour pack is much denser than the 30 kilowatt hour pack, and they're all in the same footprint.
Yes.
So that that's one of the reasons the whole rapid gate thing happened, is because there is no active cooling on the battery, so it just heats up quicker and doesn't cool down enough in time for you to plug it in. So with the 30 kilowatt hour Leaf, I can plug it in 3-4 times a day on a long trip, and it will still rapid charge at pretty much full speed. Whereas with the 40 kilowatt hour pack, at least in the past, it was the case that it would only allow you to do it twice or maybe once, and then you would have to. Certainly, Nissan actually said in their press releases after the whole thing was found out, that Leaf is only designed to be rapid charged once a day. So essentially, say the range is 150 miles. Essentially, they're restricting you to about 300-mile journey a day, which is terrible, because I can do over 300 miles a day in my current Leaf. Of course, I have to stop a bit more often, but I can.
Well, you can still do the longer journeys. You just have to wait a bit longer for the subsequent charges.
That is true. Yeah.
And presumably, if you only do it that occasionally, then you should be fine. But maybe it's going to get detrimental to do that too often.
Yeah.
I'm guessing.
So I wonder how because the rumor is, or actually it's not a rumor. Actually, I think Nissan has confirmed that the 60 kilowatt hour pack is going to be it's going to be made by somebody else. It's not good, because they used to make the batteries themselves, and now they're going to be buying the batteries from somebody else. I think it's LG, but I don't know exactly. So the chemistry is going to be obviously different, and it's a manufacturer that actually makes the batteries. That's their job.
Right.
Whereas in the past they had to make the batteries themselves, kind of like Tesla, because there was nobody else around to build them enough batteries. And I'm sure they were hoping that they could have a bit more control over the R&D process of the new batteries. I don't know why they didn't team up with somebody like Panasonic or LG, but who knows? The politics of Nissan are certainly strange, because I feel like they used to lead very much in the EV market, whereas nowadays they're a bit more, they're taking the back seat as far as the electric cars go. And we're going to talk about the cars coming to the market in 2019, and they all seem miles ahead of the Nissan Leaf, even the 60 kilowatt hour Leaf, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not quite so sure about that, because I have been looking at some of the ones certainly the ones that are shipping now, or at least brochures are out now. They're definitely interesting, and if you're in the market, you should be considering all of them. But I keep coming back to the Leaf at the moment.
Is it just a familiarity with the Leaf, or is it? Why is it? Why is that?
Just that either the Leaf actually seems to be better in terms of range and other things, or where another car might have an advantage, it has other disadvantages that the trade-offs don't work in my favour. So, for example, one of the ones that I particularly liked in theory was the the Hyundai Ioniq, but currently that doesn't have the range, even compared to the 40 kilowatt hour Leaf. Seems to be significantly better for range at the moment, and 60 kilowatt hour potentially even better, depending on that heating issue.
Well, I test drove the Ioniq, and I even have my some YouTube videos with me sort of giving quick first-hand experiences after driving it for an hour. But I think the current Ioniq only has 28 kilowatt hour battery pack, but it can do 150 odd miles in it. On it,
yes, it's efficient for the battery size, but the total range is not as great.
Yeah, I do agree, but it's very efficient, that car. So it has almost the range of the 40 kilowatt hour Leaf, but that car has been out on the market for over 2 years now. So I am hoping that they will release an upgrade to it at some point in time, because they're coming down. Hyundai is doing releasing some other cars in 2019.
Yeah.
Which have
the Kona, I think they're doing a new one.
Yeah, so there's a Kona that has a choice of 40 and 60 kilowatt hour packs, and the 60 kilowatt hour pack can do well over 300 miles apparently, if you drive it carefully. Don't know how true that is, because I haven't test drove myself any one of these. And if you look at the Hyundai's website, or certainly the UK website, they don't have them listed as available at all. Even though, if you look at shows like Fully Charged and some others, they've been given an option to test drive them. So obviously we're not as popular of a show as Fully Charged. But I would hope
not yet.
I would
We're
hope
working on that.
Yeah, well, Hyundai, if you're gonna give us a shout, I'll give my email at the end of the show, or just take it EV on Twitter and just hit me up. I'll be happy to test drive one.
Me too.
But in terms of a price, it's supposed to be priced around the same price as the 60 kilowatt hour Leaf, but of course, because it's a Hyundai, it's going to be much more energy efficient. Because it all comes down to the losses in the AC/DC converter or DC/AC converter actually, and the battery pack itself, that contribute to the fact that the batteries heat up so quickly, and therefore you lose a lot of power in the pack itself, in the internal pack's resistance when you're driving quick, essentially. The downside of the Kona the Ioniq that I drove, was that it didn't seem as nippy as the Leaf. So they're obviously tuning it so that it has this sort of bit more sluggish acceleration, just to save some power, so you don't have to drive carefully. The car will do the sort of careful acceleration for you, which I think is a good thing, because sometimes Leaf feels like driving a car that's just too excited to drive. And I'm sure some people had bad experiences pressing the accelerator too quickly and finding themselves in the back of something. Especially when you reverse, the Leaf seems to be way too happy to just go. You have to be really careful.
Yeah, I find the Leaf is very punchy, even in the eco mode. I leave it in eco mode almost all the time, and it's great. And those few times when I do need that extra push, like coming out of a junction that's particularly tricky, I'll just take it out of eco just for that moment. If you just turn the dials up on that a little bit more, I think that'll be fine. If you have the full torque at your disposal when you need it, but by default it drove in a more conservative way, I'd be totally happy with that. I'm sure most people would.
Yeah, I think Ioniq still has the give me all the juice button at the very end of the accelerator. I can't remember. Right. I can't remember because it's been 2 years since I test drove it, or at least a year and a bit.
Okay.
but I seem to remember that it had it, and it had a sports mode as well, which would give you the juice. The trouble is I only had that car for an hour, and because I was in London, when you're in London you can't get out in an hour. You can't get out to a proper dual carriageway and back to test drive the car, especially in the afternoon. It's nearly impossible. But I did like it, and so I because I know that they designed their cars very efficiently, or to be very efficient to drive. I am pretty much certain I can bet some money on it that with the same size of a pack, the Kona is going to be much more efficient and is going to have a much greater range. The difference is, even though Kona is advertised as a compact SUV, I think.
Yeah.
It's not really. It's how should I put it mildly? It's smaller than Leaf.
Yes, it is.
So, I had quite a few friends who know that I'm driving an electric car, and they've never seen it in person. Find it hard to believe, but they've never looked at one. And whenever they see me in the car for the first time, they always say, "It's much bigger than I thought." They were expecting, a tiny car with small wheels that looks funny. Because
you can still get those.
Yes, yeah, but they were expecting Leaf to be much smaller than it is. So I quite often have four people in the car because I take people places, and it's obviously it doesn't have as great of a range when you drive on the motorway with four people in the car, but it's still it's still got plenty of room for four people. Whereas I don't think what's the other ones, like you can get the iMev and I can't remember the other one. Whatever the Renault it was called. It was a version of iMev. The tiny car.
There's the Zoe.
No. It was true. It was I wasn't thinking about Zoe, but Zoe. Zoe is much smaller than Leaf as well.
Yeah.
But
it's a little bit smaller.
It's interesting because the 43 kilowatt-hour Zoe can in theory do about 200 miles if you drive it carefully in the summer. So it is much more energy efficient, but it is much smaller, and I don't know. I don't like the way they've designed the charging circuitry. It's a sort of a subject for a technical rant, and I don't want to do it here. But basically, in a car, you've got the battery has a DC power, and the motor needs an AC power, and you also charge it using AC power. So the sinusoid power, right? And they've designed the circuitry so that it uses the same bits essentially for charging. So for turning the AC into DC, and then for discharging. So when you drive it. So when you turn DC into AC,
okay,
and that obviously they did it to save space and cost, but that limits them in terms of the charging speed, and also causes issues if there's any technical problems with that circuitry. Obviously, it puts a much more strain on it, but it's mainly to do with the fact that they had to design it to fit all these uses, and
presumably you can't drive it and charge it at the same time.
True. for when the you can laser beam your electricity into your car.
Well, induction charging is coming apparently.
Well, I've heard that for the last 10 years, but yeah.
That requires a little bit more infrastructure, but it's an interesting idea.
It is. But yeah, I don't like mainly what I don't like about current Zoes is the fact that you can't rapid charge it properly. So it doesn't take the CCS charger; it just takes the Type 2. And yes, okay. you can in theory can do 43 kilowatt hours over that, but the not all the rapid chargers actually can pump out that much, and also. So when you go to any motorway station in the UK, you usually have one or two pumps, and only one of them is going to have the AC socket or plug. Sorry, And also because we had a Zoe for a week, and to test drive it, I just found it, I don't know, it felt very cheap and sort of tinny as a car. It just didn't feel solid. I don't know how to describe it, but it just didn't feel. I didn't get the sense that it's a decent car to drive. I'm sure it is. I'm sure there's loads of people who are happy with them, but I don't know.
Yeah, I had a similar reaction when I tried it.
I mean, it's a Renault at the end of the day, so I don't know what I was expecting. French cars, right?
So we talked about other cars coming on the market, but actually there's a few other cars coming that we haven't talked about, which I have not tried because they're out of my price range, so I'm not going to be getting one anyway. Probably the one making the biggest news is the Audi e-tron, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Audi e-tron. That looks like it's into Tesla territory in terms of price and features. So I'm not sure how they're going to compete, but it does look like a good car. Have you looked into that one at all?
I've only seen the pictures from the outside. I would love to see one in person, but obviously that's not going to be available until later on this year, I think.
Yeah. Definitely one to watch because it's a bigger car. It's I suppose you might say a sportier car, more of an SUV look.
Yeah, but basically I think Audi and Jaguar and a couple of other car manufacturers, BMW, Mercedes, they found themselves losing business to Tesla in the last 2 years. And, it especially with the Model 3 now being out in the US and now also in Europe, they're going to lose more and more. So obviously they know they have to step up, which is a good thing, because they just didn't do it out of their own volition in the past. So somebody has to kick their butt.
And that's what I find interesting about the Audi and the other cars you mentioned is that we are now seeing this new generation from other car manufacturers getting into the game, and that could signal that turning point that we've been talking about for the last year or two, that moving into the early majority stage of adoption.
Yeah, let's hope so. But I think I'm this is sort of the period to watch because of course we have quite loads of. I think what's going to happen is it's those companies dipping their toes into that market, but I think they're still very conservative about it. So if it doesn't take off, they will be less likely to put more R&D into it. I think, or because they're all trying to come up with something greater, bigger, and better than everybody else. But I don't think the new sort of electric car market works the same way, or will be working the same way as the old one. Whereas in the past the car manufacturers would have showcase cars that would be one-offs just to showcase all of their technology that they'll just wheel into the exhibition space, and that car will never be made, but it's just basically this is what we could do, sort of a thing. But you don't see Tesla doing anything like that, and it has to be said that Tesla's pretty much leading the market as far as technologies go. They're pushing that's their job, right? That's their not job, but that's their statement. That's their mission. And of course, Porsche and Audi and Merc and all the other manufacturers obviously are trying to now outshine Tesla when it comes to that, because they lost the business to those companies. So in case of Porsche, they're trying to get the fastest charging speeds, which I don't know how that's going to end for people, because obviously physics is still physics. So I don't know how they're going to solve the problem with the pack just not having as great longevity as it could. Because if you take into account all the messages that have been told by other people especially by Elon Musk, is that we said we were going to mention him, so I thought I'll slip him in. He did say that they could charge the Tesla cars much quicker than they do now, and I think they can do about 150 kilowatt hours now. But it would degrade the pack over time, or much quicker than otherwise. So they obviously have to slow it down. Essentially, when you do the rapid charging, the car tells the rapid charger how much power to give out, but all the relays in the car essentially zap put the charger in control. So all the power that goes from the charger basically goes directly into the pack, more or less. So the control is on the side of the charger, and I don't know how that's going to work out when you pump in 450 kilowatt hours into a pack, or 350, however many they've tested recently. I hope they do it. I hope they push the envelope, but it'll be interesting to see. I don't know. I haven't heard anything amazing about e-tron that would be make me that much excited. But it's nice to see Audi doing something about it, because I'm just fed up with all the PHEVs out there, trying to change the world, and each or every electric mile counts and all that BS. I'm just tired of it. The technology is out there to produce electric cars. Just produce electric cars. Spare us
the technology in the e-tron doesn't seem to be anything special. In fact, it's a bit disappointing, really, with a 95 kilowatt hour battery pack only getting about 200 miles of range. What's interesting about it is the marketing. I think it seems to be marketed more at just normal car drivers rather than electric car enthusiasts. And I think that's why I think it's possibly signalling that turning point.
Well, it's probably 200 miles range with a big pack, because the car is probably super heavy. Because I'm guessing it's a proper SUV, which I don't know why people like them these days so much, because it's a bit of it's a run for another show. But SUVs are like trying to have the sort of the triangle of things, and trying to have all three of them, which never happens. Spoiler alert. And also it's obviously designed for German autobahns, where you don't do 55 miles an hour. You do 120 miles an hour. So if you design like Germans design cars differently than Americans.
You do 120 miles an hour on the inside lane.
Exactly. So when I drove through Germany quite a few times, and even at 130 miles an hour, people overtake you at lightning speed. So it's just when you're a Tesla and you're designing a car for an American market, you take different you've got different goals. And when you're a German manufacturer and you want to actually sell cars local, so when you're Porsche, Audi, or VW, your design goals are different. And I think they just had to design a car that could be driven at speed on the autobahn, because people will want to do that.
So talking of driving on the autobahn reminds me of the other story that I was going to tell, relating to my travels recently.
Oh, go ahead.
One of my travels did take me to Germany. Went to Munich and then had to drive out to Austria. So of course I hired a car while I was there. But I actually had to hire a car back at home as well, because my second car, my diesel, the Ford S-Max, was being repaired. So while that was being repaired, I was given a courtesy car, which was an even bigger car, a Mitsubishi Shogun Sport. Massive thing it was. So I had a hire car back here in a car park at the airport while I was driving on the autobahns in Germany in another hire car, while my diesel car was being repaired. So maybe I'm not really the right person to be doing this show.
Wow. To tell the story about because I've what sort of car did ding your your diesel car?
It was actually a milk float ran into the back of it.
And it wasn't a Leaf,
while it was
right?
parked. No. But it probably was an electric vehicle, being a milk float.
I just find that ironic,
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, in the UK, certain class of people will refer to the electric cars as milk floats, as a pejorative, and just find it ironic that Phil's car was dented by an actual milk float.
Yeah. Yeah, until recently, milk floats were really the only electric vehicles that you would see on the roads in the UK. Unless you go back to the Sinclair C5. But that's a story for another show.
Exactly. Not exactly a car as well, right? Well, I'm sure it was fun to drive.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's probably a good time to wrap the show up.
As always, thank you for listening. If you got any questions, any comments, go to facebook.com/takeitev or leave us a comment at takeitev on Twitter. Thank you for your time and take it EV.